Okay, here we go. Our oval graduation technique. I'll begin on the right side. So start off by combing out a diagonal section. Now as you cut in your guideline, you have to over direct the hair forward and cut in a graduated line that goes from shorter by the ears to longer in the front. So through over direction, I'm also creating a strong amount of graduation in addition to elevation. And thirdly, the angle of my fingers is my third point of graduation through the right side. Stand just at the guest's shoulder. Make sure that your fingers, elbows, scissors, they're all parallel. If you drop your elbow while you're doing this technique, you'll have a strong tendency to go concave, and that's the exact opposite shape that we intend to create through the sides. So again, standing at the shoulders, combing the hair super clean from roots to ends, going in and cutting a super clean graduated line. Okay, so now we move into the back. I prefer starting on the rear right side because for me it's much more difficult to cut this shape on the right because my elbow position and the client's shoulders. So I prefer cutting the harder side first because my level of awareness is much more heightened. I have more energy in the beginning. So for me, I personally prefer to go and do the hard stuff first. And for me, cutting oval graduation on the right side is much more challenging than the left side. Okay, so here I'm using diagonal sections, and this section is quite large, so I'll have to break it into smaller, more manageable sections. So one, comb the hair super clean from roots to ends, and with each section, I'll be elevating slightly higher. So comb the hair straight out, handle the first portion, and as I comb out the next section, at the same time my body slightly pivots towards the left. So that way it's a lot easier to control this section. Okay, again, comb the hair super clean from roots to ends. Make sure your guideline is always super clear. Work in small, manageable areas. So when you see a section this big, you know it's impossible to cut it all in one shot. So visually in your mind, you have to break that down and then technically go out and execute that. And a really cool trick when you're cutting oval graduation on the back is you want to aim your fingers high and your elbows low. Your elbow is asymmetric and is aiming towards the client's opposite shoulder. Okay, so this next section again will increase our elevation. Over direct the hair slightly forward. Stay on your guideline. Now this next section, we'll comb that out. Pivot your body slightly towards the left, over direct slightly, following the guide, and just continue working the back portion in this manner and work it all the way to the opposite side. Although I'll go back and cut the left side, if I did a center section and stopped, I would build weight and I'd lose a lot of flow and continuity. So again, remember to elevate each section slightly higher. Stand right by what you're cutting and make sure your eyes are really near your cutting line so that way you can see tons and tons of details. Okay, so now we're preparing to cut the same technique on the opposite side. So I'll section out just where her head starts to round at the side. So from the parietal area, I'll section out that portion. Okay, so I'll section out the back area just so I can work a little bit cleaner. And again, beginning with diagonal sections. Now as I cut the left side of this shape, I'm standing, my chest is about parallel to her nose. So when I'm cutting the right side, my chest is parallel to like her ear and shoulders, between those areas. But as I flip to the other side, just to control your shape better, you should stand in front of the client's nose and then make sure that your elbow is always parallel to the shape that you're cutting. Don't drop your elbows on these shapes or you'll go concave. Okay, so the next section again, Standing in front of the nose, I'll increase my elevation slightly. I have my fingers follow my comb to my guideline. Just working off my guide, cutting in my line. Remember to always do the sides, over direct the hair forward. And here we're cutting in a graduated shape. Now my sections through the side areas, they pivot slightly. So again here, increasing my elevation. My eyes are exactly in front of what I'm cutting. Comb the hair to natural fall, make assessments. I'll take down the last section, and here, again, I'll increase my elevation just a bit, staying on my guideline and cutting my graduated shape. Okay, so now we'll progress to the back portion of the left side. I continue working with curved sections. I'll take my guideline from the side. Okay, so as you're cutting the left side, here is flipped. You want your elbows high, fingers low, fingers aiming towards the opposite side's shoulder. Stand in front of what you're cutting on the left side because it'll allow you to control the hair much better. Work in small, manageable sections. Make sure that your over direction is consistent. And through the sides, again, we're cutting a graduated shape that goes from long to shorter. Next diagonal section. Here I'll increase my elevation just slightly. And as you're working elevation through the back portion of this haircut, you always have to take into consideration the protrusion of the occipital bone. Like luckily, even her occipital bone is awesome. So it already gives me a lot of dynamic to the shape I'm cutting. So I don't have to aim for such a high graduated angle. If her occipital bone was quite flat, then I'd have to adjust the angle that I'm cutting to cut in a more three-dimensional shape. Okay, again, next diagonal section. Take a piece from your guideline from the sides, increase your elevation, have your comb mimic the angle that you intend to cut, and then just have your fingers follow your comb to your guideline, staying on guide, pulling the hair to your center, balance. And then with this area, I'm just swinging the chair over a little bit more. So this portion is again right at my center chest, following my guideline, elbows high, fingers down, fingers flowing towards the opposite shoulder. And just work in that graduation. Take another diagonal section. So remember here, we're increasing our elevation. So notice how my elevation here is much higher than my guideline from the initial section. And as you work this next area, pivot slightly towards the right. Comb the hair super clean from roots to ends, and make sure that your over direction is consistent. So here I'm also starting to incorporate the shape that we cut through the right side. So now both sections are starting to meet. So I'll get a corner, and I'll chase that corner down from the beginning of my section to my occipital bone. If the shape that I'm cutting is symmetrical, that corner will be balanced right at the occipital bone. So that's an indicator that tells me throughout my haircut that, hey, we're on. This thing's happening. Okay, and here we move to the top portion. I'll work from her natural parting that begins on the left, and I'll check that into the center crown. So my sectioning to the top is diagonal. If it were a straight line, my weight distribution would be totally off. So like starting off where the hair naturally parts and combing a diagonal line to the center crown will give me the best amount of balance. So I'll take my graduation from the sides and the back. I'll comb the hair straight out, and I continue to cut in my graduated shape. Now this graduated guideline will change because it's a fusion of like the two guidelines through the back and the side. So when I get two different angles put together, I'll get a new one. So here I'm cutting the hair with elevation because I want the top portion of this haircut to fall very softly. I want to see a lot of movement and soft texture with the cut. So my elevation is really important here. So again, next diagonal section. Comb the hair straight out, and I'll start to over direct the hair slightly more to the right side, just to give me that symmetry and balance when the hair falls naturally. So here you could use the exact technique. If you wanted the top portion to fall much harder, then just decrease your elevation. But for this instance, I want a much softer aesthetic. So again, I'll increase my elevation, because when we cut, as we elevate, things become softer. As we lower the shape, things become harder. So I'm just kicking that principle into play here. And at the hairline, I'm just using slight tension because the hair is a bit finer there. Comb the hair to natural fall, make assessments, and I'll do the exact same technique on the opposite side. So through the left portion, I'll take my guideline through the back, comb the hair straight out, high elevation, and make sure you have a piece of the guideline from the opposite side through the top. It just helps you to keep your symmetry and balance. And as you're cutting, the more guidelines that you have, the more technical support that you have under your belt to allow you to create the most awesome shape possible. So again, cutting in this steep graduation. Okay, now come out my next diagonal section as I work forward. Make sure your sections are always super clean. If you're cutting and you have the habit of working with really messy sections, it's bad form. It hampers your ability to cut at the highest level of performance, because with messy sections, you really can't see as many details, and excellence is always about the details. And it takes me the exact amount of time and effort to work with a messy section or a clean section. It's just a habit. Okay, so still continue to cut in that steep graduation. Here I'm using less tension because at the hairline, the density is off, there's less hair, and the hair is a bit finer, so just to compensate for that. Okay, so I blow dried using flat wrapping, probably 80% flat wrap, 10% leafing, 10% beveling. I just want to get an organic shape. So now that the hair is dry, I'm going to start on the sides and cut out like a super clean line. So as you're working these details, you have to make sure that your eyes are visually right in front of what you're cutting. So just work with the tips of your shears, because again, this is all detail work. Now to the opposite side, I'm just going in, I'm just cleaning out that line a bit, because the hair falls significantly different wet and dry. So this is just more detail work. So as I work these sides, I kind of compare the line that I'm cutting to the fine line of my scissors. So when I can get this line that I'm cutting as clean and smooth as like the back of my comb or my scissors, that's a good indicator to let me know that, okay, this line is good enough and I can progress to the next portion. Okay, now through the back, I'll cut in a diagonal line through the left side. So just working with the tips of my shears. And as my shears open and close, I pivot my angle, so it'll allow me to cut in a nice curved shape. And here, don't rush it. Take your time, make the back perfect, because half the time, half the people see your end result from the back. Just keep on working until you're satisfied with the shape. Visual assessments. Okay, so now I'll go in and clean the opposite side. So Even has this really awesome cowlick. So now that it's dried naturally, I'm adapting my shape. I'm going to cut in a curved line here that kind of progresses lower. It'll give me like a little tail peek through that right corner. So again, it's always best to, if you get lemons, to make lemonade, because often the case is people will just knock down that cowlick, which will look nice for like a couple of days, but as it grows out, that root lift will totally throw off your line. So here I'm just incorporating that cowlick and making it in acid, making it allow the back of my haircut to look even that much cooler, awesome, and amazing. Okay, take your time, don't rush it. Details, if you want a curved line, again, adapt the angle of your scissors as the scissor opens and closes. And here I'm just cleaning out this line. Just minute details. And I like putting a lot of attention to the back because, again, it gets less attention after the haircut. Here I'll go high speed on the texturizing. So as I texturize the hair, I'm removing heaviness. I'm not changing my shape. So I just chip into like the first, say, inch of my lengths. And just working it so it visually falls soft. And I like to comb my hair from the roots to the ends. And then from there I can feel where the heaviness is. So if you find heaviness, you can go back and texturize more. That's like the indicator that I use that works best. Like once I can comb the hair super smooth from roots to ends without snags, then I know my distribution of the weight is on. So just keep on working the shape, removing weight, making visual assessments, and work it down until you're satisfied. Okay, now for the fringe area, I'm just cleaning up that line and cleaning it where it falls naturally. So this oval graduation technique is super fun, and there's a lot of creative adaptations that'll kick in once you have the skill set down. Then you can start breaking the rules and bending them. Okay, well, there we have it. Oval graduation. Enjoy.